Hello everybody. So today I want to make a video about a pretty good news we got on MSTR, which is James Chanos, a very vocal short who had a long Bitcoin short MSTR trade for quite a while, exited the position, unwound the position, and kind of admitting that the trade is over. And there's 2 points that I have to make. First of all, is when you read the statement, you can clearly see that he exited the trade, but he's advised clients to take that trade too. He's advised people to take that trade. So a big question is, how much capital was actually shorting strategy because they were following James Chanos into that trade? That's point number one. And then point number two, he's saying there's essentially breadcrumbs left if you still want to go on with that trade, because he concludes MSTR inevitably marches towards a 1x mNAV. And I disagree. I think we may have periods of bear market where we trade at under 1x mNAV, and that, that could be 6 months, a 3 months period, something like that. But over the long run, I don't think we are going to be trading under mNAV. I think we're going to be trading kind of similarly to banks. Banks don't trade at a 1 price to book. They trade at like a 1.8 price to book or 1.6 price to book. If MSTR eventually becomes a quote-unquote bank, which is the direction they're taking issuing credit, they should be trading at a premium to book. And the book, of course, will be the Bitcoin. That premium may never be a 5 or a 6. I entirely agree with that. That's too high. But a premium of 1 is a little too low. And if you look at banks who trade at a premium of, 0.8, they're typically very, very poorly managed banks, with lots of issues. This is not the case of strategy, in my view. This is a positive. Why is this a positive? Because a lot of pressure on the stock has been due to short interest. Short interest is 9.4%. That may not seem like a lot, but it's actually a lot for a company that is in the NASDAQ 100 and for a company that has a market cap of $69 billion. For the size of that company, that's actually quite a bit. And so I want to spend a second to talk about kind of the reasons as to why we should be trading at a premium to mNAV. Saylor, that was the Q1 presentation. In the Q1 presentation, Saylor included this slide as to why we should be trading at a premium to Bitcoin itself and at a premium to, say, a Bitcoin ETF, which Bitcoin ETF just wraps Bitcoin with a fee. So that's kind of one issue. And by the way, one main advantage that doesn't put in there, of course, is that strategy doesn't charge a fee. So that's of course, the obvious advantage number one. But there's a lot of other advantages. A big advantage of owning strategy versus owning Bitcoin or Bitcoin ETF is amplification. Notice how he moved away from using the word leverage towards using the word amplification. And that's the presentation that I've given many times, talking about draining money from the system and flowing it into Bitcoin. And he's been draining a lot of money from the system by issuing the common equity. That's been the most of the story of strategy has been common equity, but he's now draining equity from the system via the stretch ATM and ATMing stretch. And he started doing that this week. Most likely we'll know that on Monday. So taking money from what would be money market money now going into Bitcoin, and then taking money from what would be bond market money going into Bitcoin. And that's the idea that this is a one-way street, a one-way path. Once Saylor buys Bitcoin, he's set up the balance sheet in a way that the money can only flow one way, and he's not going to sell Bitcoin to pay back the money. That's why all of this debt is perpetual. He never intends to pay it back. He's just helping the dollar flow to Bitcoin and not the other way around. So that's the reason number one as to why there should be a premium to NAV is you're going to get amplification. You're going to get higher returns by owning MSTR. That's the theory. Options advantage. A lot of people want to make money on options, and strategy has arguably been better to make money on options than, say, IBIT or even Bitcoin itself with the future. That's arguably true, in my view, still to this day, if you look over the long run. Third, you have passive flows. So strategy should be a little more stable. Again, that's the theory, but it should be a little more stable because we are in the NASDAQ 100. And eventually, and I think that's going to be many quarters from now, not Q4, but eventually it will be in the S&P 500, which should stabilize the stock. And then, of course, we have institutional access. So strategy has access to a greater pool of capital than Bitcoin itself. And so strategy capital can flow into strategy in a way that it can't flow into Bitcoin. And as a result of that, the bid on strategy should always be a little higher than the bid of Bitcoin, and they have that inflow of capital. Of course, right now we're in a bear market for the stock, so we don't really feel that. There's two other advantages that I'll give to strategy as opposed to just owning Bitcoin or an ETF, is you have a tax advantage. So in the US, you can own the ETF in a tax advantage account, but you still have countries that don't have ETFs. But stocks are readily available anywhere. And so you can own stocks in a tax advantage account. You can't really do that with a Bitcoin ETF in many countries and with Bitcoin pure form in many countries. So strategy should attract new shareholders because of that, and that should be a premium. And then and this is something that they share with the ETF, that strategy shares with the ETF, which is the operation security. Bitcoin, you always have a security risk of you losing your keys or doing something wrong and getting hacked. If you buy a Bitcoin ETF or if you buy strategy, you manage your keys. And so that should translate a little bit of a premium for strategy. I think over the long run, strategy is going to trade at a premium. I don't know if that premium is going to be similar to the price to book that banks experience, but to me, right now, if you do look at basic mNAV, we're at like 117 or 116 in basic mNAV. I consider that way too low for strategy. And I will also conclude this video talking about what's going on today. Saylor tweeting buy now with a little Bitcoin sign. So he thinks Bitcoin is a good deal, and that's going to be the big news of next week. Next week we may see some price action on Bitcoin, because per my understanding, these funds of the Stream ETF, not ETF, the Stream Preferred that he's launching in Europe, these funds he's going to get on Thursday. So on Thursday is likely when the buy of Bitcoin is going to buy, and could him just flowing 620 million into Bitcoin make Bitcoin pop on Thursday? Well, it is possible. I mean, a lot of people have argued that when Bitcoin was doing so well in July and August, that probably was because a lot of inflows were coming from these treasury companies. Saylor is going to go back buying heavy, and we'll also see on Monday how much stretch he bought, because he was ATMing stretch for 3 out of 5 days out of the week. And so I'm so curious to see that number. I'm hoping he bought like 1,000 Bitcoin. That's what I'm really hoping for Monday. So we'll see how that goes. Pretty bullish that the short seller is gone, that James Chanos is gone. Maybe at one day he will be long the stock, maybe. So anyways, this was not investment advice. This is not financial advice, only entertainment on this channel. Please like, please subscribe, follow me on Patreon, follow me on X. Thank you for watching, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.